Are you ready to get destroyed by Ben Shapiro? Because apparently he can debunk our claim, the left's claim, on income inequality and systematic racism. He's gonna destroy us and add us to his cup of leftist tears. Probably not, but we'll see. We'll see. We'll see. All right, Benny boy, what do you have to say to us?
Jordan in Utah, you're on the Ben Shapiro Show. Go for it, Jordan.
Hi, Ben. Thanks for taking my call. So I had a question for you again about systemic racism. So I'd had this experience as a missionary in Connecticut on the drive between West Hartford to Hartford, where everyone went from, it's actually Hartford to West Hartford, where everyone went from usually poor, not white, and then 2 blocks later, like mini mansions everywhere, everyone's white. And I feel like left has done a really good job in kind of taking this kind of general feeling of like, oh, look, there's, people are poor and no one's white over there. And then 2 blocks later, like everyone's white, everyone's rich. They've done a really good job of kind of taking that message and turning it into systemic racism, right?
I'm glad he has good observational skills and can literally see systematic racism at play, but not accept that that's what's at play. It's like it can be like right in front of their face and they'll like still deny it. Like, I mean, he's talking about literally seeing the outcomes of that and then going, that's not what's actually happening. So let me ask Ben Shapiro what's actually happening.
Yes.
So I was wondering if you thought there was anything conservatives could do as far as messaging to kind of still address the problem, but do it in a conservative way where like...
Sure.
I don't understand how you solve such a problem in a conservative way when conservatives are against the idea of systematic racism itself existing. The only thing I can think of is trying to say this is just solely an economic issue, and that this racism isn't real. But what they don't realize is systematic racism is systematic. It's a part of the system, which includes the economic system. Actually, it's a big part of it. But the thing is, it disproportionately affects these communities. So I don't really know what a conservative approach to this problem would be if the conservatives aren't even willing to accept that this is a problem in the first place. Well, except for he does say it's a problem. He just won't accept that it's at all a racial problem, which is really weird.
So I think so Jordan, I think that there's a category error that has been actively promulgated by the media and by the political left. And you mentioned the category error here. And that is, there are 2 cross-cutting distinctions that we've mentioned in this conversation already. The cross-cutting distinction between poor and rich, and the cross-cutting distinction between black and white. One of these is not the cause, right? So what the left has done is they've said that the distinctions are essentially the same. They've conflated the 2. Poor equals black, rich equals white, right? This is...
Okay, no one on the left is exactly saying that. What we're critiquing is the use of class to oppress minority groups. So the thing is, say we didn't have class at all. Now, there could still be racism, of course. There could be someone trying to say some gamer words at someone, or I would say deny a job, but I don't know how that would really... I don't think that would really work in a classless society, but there would be a law. It'd be a lot harder to enforce racism. So the way that it gets done now is through class. Like, what's the best way to make a group of people, like a race, suffer? Make them poor. Keep them poor. That's kind of what's happening. Because if you think about it, I mean, also there's just things that have happened through history that are part of the system that keep people poor, as will keep black people and other minority groups poor. This is why it's systematic racism. We can look at generational wealth, for instance. When African Americans were enslaved, they couldn't generate any wealth because they were slaves. Then even after slavery was over, they weren't able to get jobs and things like that, or they were living so like paycheck to paycheck, there was no way to put money back to grow wealth. Now, white people didn't have this problem. We got to be the slave owners, and we got the chances to grow this wealth and pass it down from generation to generation, so it had like a snowballing effect. So now what we see is a giant disparity between races and their class and where they're at class-wise. Now we have things in place within the system that keep these groups from getting out of that class, which is what is racist. So, for instance, our education system is funded by property taxes. Now, if you're poor, you're going to live in a poorer community, which means less money is going to come out of property taxes, which means education will not be as well funded. And if education isn't as well funded, the chances of getting into a good college and things like this go down drastically. And then from that, getting a well-paying job is going down drastically. We can see that with a college education, you're more likely to get higher pay, have better jobs, yada yada. Without one, you're going to have a significantly harder time. So there's all these boundaries in place keeping blacks and brown people and all these other races from getting out of the predicament they're in, which is what is systematic racism. It's all these institutional things that keep them from getting out of the class, and the class is what is oppressing them. So in a sense, class is being used as a tool of oppression on minority groups, if that makes sense.
Something that Joe Biden himself has said. Right? Joe Biden gaffed a couple months ago, and he said, there's a difference between being rich and being black, right? Which is an incredible statement. There are lots of rich black people in America, and there are lots.
Okay, that was a pretty bad gaffe, but a majority of these people are going to be poor, just statistically, because of the generational wealth thing we brought up. You're more likely to be impoverished if you're black because of generational wealth. You're more likely to have at least an okay income, or at least have a nice family unit, just more wealth within your family if you're white, due to having the generational wealth. So as much as that was an awful gaffe, because obviously not all black people are poor, obviously, but statistically, you have more against you if you're in any minority group than a white person. So they're more likely to be poor. Yes.
Lots of poor white people in America.
Oh yeah.
So what? So
yeah.
And of course, there are outliers. Like there are poor white people, there are rich black people. This doesn't matter when we're looking at things from a sociological level.
Because black people in the United States are disproportionately poorer than white people in the United States, although Asian people in the United States are disproportionately richer than either one of those groups, by the way.
I hate that so much, because the thing we can look at when it comes to Asians is, one, they didn't have the generational wealth problems that black people went through like slavery and whatnot. There was slight discrimination of them when they came to America, but not near at the level. And now when we have Asians come over to the US, they usually have a big background in money because it costs a lot to get here. So most of them who immigrate over have already a good income, and in America, since we're so like capitalist, they're able to use that income to make even more money. So of course you don't see the same sort of oppression. It's doesn't make any sense to pull that up when we can literally see why there'd be a difference really easily.
By the way, because people conflate the cross-cutting distinctions between, because they basically argue that poor equals black and rich equals white.
Once again, literally no one is saying that. We're just saying that you're more likely to be poor if you're black because of institutions, which is true. You even admitted, Ben Shapiro, to there being a disproportionate rate of black people being poor, okay? This is just, we're not saying that they can't get out of that. All we're saying is that this seems to be the fact, and it's because institutions are against them. And things like generational wealth and all these other things. And this is why we argue for reparations and whatnot, and fixing a lot of our systems, and other policy, basically. But no one is literally going, if you're black, you were poor. If you're white, you're rich. No one's saying that on the left. That's dumb. That's really reductive. You know that's not what we're saying, Ben. Quit being dishonest.
First of all, that's kind of racist because it ain't true. But two, it's ignoring the real problem, which is how do we get poor people to be richer? Right? The question is not, did those rich people steal the money from the poor people? Because they didn't.
They exploited all of them and took their surplus labor, but whatever, Ben. We can ignore that.
The question is, and the question isn't, are there legal structures in place that keep the poor people poor? Because there aren't.
There are. Holy shit. Does he just think that all like minority groups are just lazy or something? Like, like I just brought up the property tax thing with education. That's obviously something that's in the way. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, there's also things like they did that study where people like applied to jobs, and if you had like a black last name, you were less likely to get the job or whatever. Or first name, whatever it is. So I mean, obviously, there's other like biases within society that are against these minority groups. So there literally are things. This is just lying and acting like these people are just lazy, and this is why they don't. They're poor or whatever, which is so dumb, so reductive. All right, Benny boy, give us some more logic and facts here.
The real question is, and the question isn't even what happened in history to make certain areas.
Okay, I love that he knows what all the arguments are because he's literally going through and saying, well, there's nothing against them. It doesn't matter what happened in history. He's like he's being so proactive. He's being so proactive and like stopping these arguments because he knows what the arguments are, because he knows that they're right. This is why I think Ben Shapiro is one of the most dishonest people, because believe it or not, he has to at least be somewhat smart. And he's just straight up fucking lying. It's why he went through, he's literally said it's none of these things. He doesn't want to talk about them because he wants to take them off the table. Because if we talked about those things, we'd show that he was wrong and that systematic racism was real.
Lower income versus certain areas higher income. The question is, what can we do today to make poor people richer?
Sure, get rid of a lot of the things that are against these people. Fix our welfare system. Free education. We can talk about reparations if we wanted to. There's a lot of policies that we can do, but I'm sure he's going to say something about opening up the market or some other thing that is literally going to do nothing.
And this is why you've seen, it's really fascinating. You've seen a gap open up, or at least there was a gap until very recently, between sort of the Bernie Sanders wing of the party, the sort of socialist wing of the Democratic Party, and the racial justice warrior wing of the Democratic Party. Because Bernie sounds kind of more like a Republican when he suggests that what we're really talking about is the distinction between rich and poor. Right? His solutions are wrong, but he says what we're.
Okay, my camera died in the middle of that, but we're back. So this argument that Bernie Sanders is somehow taking a conservative approach to this is just dumb, because we are aware of the racial social justice problems, as Benny Boy puts it. We just understand that one of the things that's being used to oppress, not the only thing, obviously, there's biases within society that oppress these people, but one of the main things is through class, by keeping these people poor. So of course we're going to look at it through class, because that's one of the ways we can fix this. I mean, obviously there's other ways that we can do this by making sure these people get other opportunities, but getting them out of these impoverished communities is one of the first steps to allowing them to get other opportunities. But yeah, that's just dumb.
Really talking about is a class issue here. And then there are Democrats who say it's not really a class issue, it's a race issue. But Bernie is right that it's more of a class issue, right?
It's a both issue. It doesn't have to be one or the other. This is like a false dichotomy. It doesn't have to just be race, or it has to just be class. It's a race issue that is reinforced by class. Both of these things are a problem. I mean, we even see just race in some cases, like I was saying with the whole thing where if you apply, if your name is as like an African American name or something, you're more likely to be rejected. Which is obviously a bias thing. You have the over-policing of black communities, all these things. But you also have all the class problems of being able to get good, being able to get good education, to be able to get even a better, higher-paying job. There's just a lot of things. Like, whenever you're poor as well, this is why we see, like, in black communities, the crime rate is higher. It's not because, like, black people are just violent, it's because they're poor, so poor people tend to do more crime. I mean, we see this even with white people. This doesn't make... But, like, because of that, then you have the over-imprisonment of black people, which goes back to it being a race issue as well as not just a class issue. Class is just being used to reinforce the race problems. So it's not one or the other, it's both of them. But Ben Shapiro is going to act like it has to be one or the other, and then he's going to go, so we should focus on class, and then Someone make an argument that the only way to fix class is by telling people to pull themselves up from their bootstraps or whatever.
Is more about like poor versus rich. And then the question becomes, what decisions can we incentivize in people's lives so that poor areas become richer? What can we do?
So he's talking about just incentivizing people instead of actually doing any sort of programs or policies that can actually do this. He just wants to influence people to pick themselves up from their bootstraps, because that's what it is. They're all just lazy and not working hard enough, which is dumb as fuck. It's just fucking stupid, because there are so many things that get in the way. No matter how hard you work, you can work really hard. You could be a really hard worker, but if no one will take your application to work somewhere, hey, you're still out of a job. I don't care like how much work you do. You're still out of a job. You could work really hard in school, like really, really hard, but if you have to maintain 3 jobs in order to make sure your mom isn't homeless and you're not homeless and you can feed your siblings, it doesn't matter. Your grades are gonna suffer. It doesn't matter how hard you're working in these 3 jobs and trying to do this. Your grades are gonna suffer, which then is going to keep you from being able to, if you're in high school, get to a good university, or if you're in university, have good enough grades to get a good job. Like, there is more to this problem than the idea that people are just lazy, which is what these people will always reduce it to. Though they won't realize that there are like real institutional problems that get in the way of these people. No matter how hard they work, they're stuck there. You know, like it's like the same thing with like well, never mind. This just frustrates me so much, because there's only so much power we as individuals have, which is one of the biggest problems in America. Is we see that the individual can do it all when that isn't the case. There's a lot of collective things that affect all of us, and some of us disproportionately, that end up oppressing people, and we should work to fix those instead of just telling people like, nah, if you just work hard, it doesn't matter, which is reductive, dumb. Okay, I'm off my tirade. We'll continue watching.
To gentrify those areas. And one of the things that you will see from members of the political left is an objection to many of the steps that need to be taken in order to make it easier for poor people to become rich.
I'm pretty sure we push for a lot of policies that would do this that Ben's against, so I'm curious what he's going to be talking about.
So this is what you see with the insane stuff from the National Museum of African American History and Culture, where they say that punctuality, cause and effect, that the scientific method, these are white people things. No, those are ways that you get successful, right? Being a
One, I've never heard that. 2, understanding that the scientific method exists isn't really going to get you out of being impoverished. What I'm guessing this person was saying is like, just accepting these things isn't going to fix you being impoverished. Like, you don't really need to know the scientific method in order to have a job. Like, I don't know what he's going on. I don't know what this dude is on.
diligent person is how you become successful in the United States, regardless of your race. It's why when you see the left saying we need to get rid of the police, you think to yourself, okay, that is making...
Okay, if this were the case, why is the guy who's working 3 jobs, working about 80 hours, not a fucking millionaire? While Jeff Bezos, for instance, fucking, like, does absolutely nothing every day. He gets to sit on his booty and make, like, some insane... I can't even think about the amount, but it's, like, way more than I could ever imagine making. It's not about being... As much as, yes, hard work can help a little bit, I'm not going to say you can't work hard and get things. Obviously, if you work hard, you're going to be better than where you would be if you didn't work hard. But that doesn't mean that you can get out of being, impoverished by just working hard. Like, working hard itself isn't a solution to a systematic problem. That's the problem. It's systematic. It's not individual. People aren't just lazy. There's literal institutional things in their way. Oh my god, I did the clap meme. That's fucking cringe as shit. But I'm just fucking... This shit pisses me off so much.
Making it worse for poor people, regardless of race. It's making it significant, which is why, by the way, 81%...
Everything he says, he has to go, regardless of race.
We don't want to focus on the race things, even though we could see that this disproportionately affects the races. But let's just not look at that.
Trust me. There's no racism. It's America. You just gotta work hard.
Percent of black Americans say they want at least the same number of police in their neighborhoods or more police in their neighborhoods. I think the human beings have an innate tendency to make distinctions.
How did he get all the way to the police thing? That didn't even like get brought up. Like he just knows that black communities are over policed, and once again he's being proactive and going like, look, they want it. They want it. They want more police there. The reason why people want more police there is because there's more crime, obviously. But putting more police there doesn't fix the problem. If anything, it imprisons more people and ends up people where they have less people to bring in income to the homes. So there's a lot of bad effects that come from it. But sure, you could say there's some people who want more police there. I don't think, though, that explains anything at all. And if anything, it's just dodging the very thing he knows the leftists would say to him. He's not debunking any of these. All he's literally doing is just writing them off. He's not explaining them away. He's literally just going, nope, don't accept any of these.
Based on visible differences, like differences between race. But the actual visible differences that should matter are the differences between, for example, rich and poor. How many cops are on the streets? What are the
Sure, these should be the things that matter. This should be it. But that isn't the case. It's because these things disproportionately affect certain groups. So it is a race thing. There's no getting around this. In a perfect world, yes, we wouldn't have to worry about the axis of race problems. We could just focus on the economic problems. That'd be amazing. But that isn't the only axis that affects these people. And just turning away from it, being colorblind, if you will, allows you to not see these forms of oppression. I think the saying goes like, if you're colorblind, you're blind to racism. You can't see the racism that's happening if you won't see color. Which is why it's important for us to look at these things through a racial lens as well and see how different things affect these races disproportionately, what other things add to this that come from racism within society, like the biases. Look at the history of other racist acts that happen, how they still affect people today. There's no getting outside of the race thing. Sorry, Benny boy, we don't live in that society, and you acting like this race problem doesn't exist. It's just dishonest. And I'm pretty sure Benjamin knows this. Because of the fact that he's literally tried to be proactive and just write off any of the arguments without explaining them away.
housing conditions like? How do we get more businesses into these neighborhoods? What are the crime rates like? Right? If you want to make it so that poorer areas in
yeah, but we also need to know why these things happen. Why are the crime rates higher? Why won't businesses go to these places? Like, I don't know what to say.
Hartford are more like richer areas, then how do you make it so that poorer areas are more like richer areas, rather than assuming that the white people are keeping the black people down, or that some sort of de facto segregation is the actual rationale here?
I agree with that, though. Segregation of races is not the way to fix this problem. Okay, all right. Any fascists watching? No. This will not fix anything.
Instead of individual decision making that can actually be cured. You can't really cure the nature of human sin. What you can do is incentivize people to make good decisions and make it easier for them to make good decisions.
Yeah, we can make it easier for them to make good decisions by attacking these institutional things that are racist. Come on, Ben. You're like almost there. You're like right there. It's like, come on, just move a little bit. Accept that there's some sort of racism. You just do that. And you would accept actual leftist policies. Then you would see these problems go away, Ben. You're like right there. It's like he knows. He just refuses to like accept it. Like, it's so fucking frustrating.
By vitiating the obstacles to cause and effect. What crime does, for example, is it vitiates. What crime does is it creates an obstacle to cause and effect. Right? You're working hard, you're doing your best, and you can't get any customers to come in your store because they're afraid they're going to get robbed. Right? You're doing what you can, and the system has not provided protection.
Yeah, but do you not think the people who can't get by are the exact same people that are robbing these stores because they can't get by? Ben, do you think maybe the problem is the person working the store not making enough, or having to get stuck at that job without being able to move up because he doesn't have the education appropriate? Like, come on, dude.
For your property. So what do we need to do? We need to provide protection for your property so that cause and effect are now effectuated.
So is there a message Republicans should be pushing? Because a lot of it's just like, Democrats are wrong, but I feel like Democrats are.
Do you know what mattress ranked number
we got
one
an ad.
in customer satisfaction by J.D. Power? One of those memory foam mattresses?
No.
Winning the messaging on this.
Well, I think Democrats are winning the messaging, mainly because
They're winning because they're closer to right than you are, Ben. Because they're accepting the fact that this is not just a class problem, but a race problem.
Most Americans see disproportionate differences between groups, and they immediately assume that that is due to inequity, that it is due to some sort of discrimination.
It is. You are the one that has to jump hurdles to say it's not. While we can easily, one, people see it, and it's pretty intuitive that this is happening. Two, we can study it, and we can see this is happening. You are going out of your way to act like these things don't exist. I mean, like I said before, you proactively said that none of these arguments have anything to do with this, even though they have everything to do with it. I mean, generational wealth, all these things like have to do with this, and he wants to act like they don't exist. So he's literally having to ignore evidence and jump hurdles to make his argument work here. He hasn't debunked anything really. He's just said, I don't believe in that.
So the conflation between
Right.
disparity and discrimination is a very easy one. It's an easy mental trick to play. But the truth is that there are disparities between every group, right? As I mentioned earlier, Asian Americans have a much higher household income than white Americans. That doesn't mean that Asian Americans are discriminating against white Americans or that the system is built to benefit Asian Americans. It means that there are many areas of the United States where people individually need to make better decisions, or governments need to make better decisions about how to incentivize good decision making and prevent crime.
He just wants to incentivize good decision making, but it just doesn't. I don't know how you talk to someone like this and get them to understand that, because they think everything is just personal decisions. Which one? I don't even believe in the idea of free will and being able to make these it's just dumb. Okay, it's dumb, and I don't know how you convince someone who thinks everything is personal decisions to realize that no matter what your personal decisions are, even if they're perfect, they're systematic barriers in the way of being successful. Yeah, I don't know. This is just so brain dead.
And yes, put criminals in jail, and that would be a good thing. The same leftists who are claiming
Also, criminals in jail. I mean, we have so many fucking criminals in jail apparently, and that hasn't fixed anything. I mean, we have the highest amount of people in prison, or some insane. I'd have to look up the statistic, but I know it's insane. So obviously, just putting people in prison isn't fixing this. I mean, we can look at that and be like, oh, wait, are people still impoverished? Does this still negatively affect the black community? Who are the most imprisoned people? Black people. Oh, wait a minute. This didn't fix anything. I mean, you can literally just look that this didn't work. So his idea here is to incentivize and imprison criminals. Both these things. One, incentivizing people to do hard work, sure, but that's not going to fix everything. Two, imprison criminals. We already do that, and it hasn't worked.
that we need better opportunities in poor minority neighborhoods are opposing gentrification. Gentrification is bringing more money into those communities. You can't have it both ways.
Yeah, cool.
Jordan,
Thanks,
really
Ben. I
appreciate the
appreciate
call. And thanks for the missionary work. That's obviously a very, very good thing. Steve in Chicago, you're on the Ben Shapiro Show. Go for it, Steve.
Hey, Ben. Several years ago, you were doing a live show in Seattle with Black Lives Matter activists. It's a popular YouTube clip. When asked about whether racism is a driving factor in income inequality, you responded, because it has nothing to do with race and everything to do with culture. Some of your fellow panelists initially started laughing, but you continued with your response and they had no answer. So I wanted to ask you, could you define culture? What elements of culture in the Black community are driving income inequality? And is it possible to discuss culture honestly without being branded a racist, since race and culture are so deeply interrelated?
So, first of all, I don't think that race and culture have to be interrelated, nor should they be. I mean, I wouldn't say that it is quote unquote black culture to not value education. There are plenty of black Americans who value education extraordinarily highly. I think that there are certain pathologies that exist in poor communities, black or white, that are common across those communities. Now, they may not exist in the same proportions in those communities, but that has nothing to do with race and everything to do with culture, right?
Okay, so this, I actually would say I probably agree with to an extent. So one of the things with impoverished communities is there is this culture developed because it becomes normalized to steal and things like that, which then end up hurting its own community. Obviously, the problem though isn't here to blame people for just not being good people, but instead look at like why this crime is occurring and why has it become normalized. And it's become normalized because people depend on it to get by. I mean, like, That's why crime is so high in poorer communities, is because it's dependent on. So of course, a culture develops where crime is okay because most people have to do it to get by. But you can't just critique the culture and expect it to change by critiquing it. We have to look at the systematic things that lead to that. And I think I know that's not what he's gonna say though. He's just gonna say it's a bad culture, people have bad mentalities. But the thing is, culture develops from material conditions people are in, the resources they have available to them, the environment around them, all these things. So sure, there's a culture that reinforces it, but the culture first came from the material conditions that cause people to have to steal and do other crime to get by.
Right? There are areas of white Appalachia where education is not valued particularly highly. J.D. Vance talks about this.
Also, education would be valued higher, like better if it higher if it was better. A lot of the education in these communities obviously isn't going to be that great. Bless the teachers who are trying, though. But with no money going into the education institutions in those towns, it's hard for them to have a good education system. I mean, education costs money. Having the supplies to educate costs money. Getting textbooks that are like relevant still, it costs money. All these things cost money. And if the school doesn't have funding to get these things, the education's going to be poor. And if the education's poor, of course, people are not going to like care as much about it.
In hillbilly elegy, the pathologies of poverty that exist cross-racially are the same. And then it's just a question of how often they exist in particular communities, regardless of race. So pathologies of poverty include not valuing education enough, such that your kids are not spending a lot of time on homework, or not having fathers in the home, such that you have two parents who are available to help read with your kids. Pathologies of poverty include high crime, include, again...
It's because these things are dependent on in these communities. That's the problem. If you want to get rid of... If you're going to blame... Okay, this is what's weird. If we're going to blame the communities for being poor because of crime, but then we're going to say that these crime things come from a culture cultivated by being poor, that's very, like, circular, you see. We're saying that the communities are poor because they commit crime, and then we go, and that crime creates a culture that makes them poor. When we should just go, being poor creates this culture that does bad things, that keeps people like... Okay, I don't know if I can even argue it better, but you understand. You see the problem. You see the problem. This circular sort of thing, where instead of realizing that the core issue that makes the culture the way it is, makes the crime the way it is, all stem from being poor. Instead, we're doing this weird, like, crime is what's making people poor. And then we'll go, and then being poor makes a culture. Then we make that culture makes the crime, or makes them poor. When we can literally just go, obviously, because the culture has a little bit to do it, but it's more just being poor creates the crime. Being poor also creates the culture. It doesn't go all the way around here. So if we can fix people being poor, we fix both those things.
And lack of fathers in the home means that very often young men tend to congregate in gangs.
I want to clarify, though, I'm not just saying literally, like, the only problem is being poor. We have to fix the things, the racial things that make people poor. Like, it's not just putting money there. There's a lot that goes into that. But it all stems from keeping these communities impoverished, which is the racial aspect.
Right? Those are pathologies of poverty. Right? All of those pathologies are not unique to the black community. They may exist disproportionately in particular black communities, but...
I love that he's implying, though, it's like, don't you see the blacks have a bad culture and have a bad community. Like he and then he goes, but I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that. Like, we do see this stem across communities, like poor communities. The reason why it's seen in black communities is because black communities are more likely to be poor for all of the reasons I have stated in this video previous. I'm not going to go back through them, but
that doesn't mean that that's because of the race. The bottom line is that the recipe for success is the same for everyone in the United States. You make responsible decisions. You don't have babies out of wedlock. You finish high school. If you go to college, try to major in something where you're actually going to make money on the other end. Like, for example, you'll see people cite...
That isn't enough. And some people don't get those opportunities. A lot of people have to drop out of high school. A lot of people don't get to go to college. The problem is assuming that these are opportunities everyone gets to have, without looking at the background of these people that keep them from having these opportunities. Okay? We do not have equal opportunity in America. Anyone who tells you that is selling you shit. It doesn't exist. Okay? So there isn't a one plan of success. And if you make good decisions, there's still things that are against you. Like I said, generational wealth is something you can't help. You can't help that your ancestors were enslaved. Like there was nothing you could do about that. But that's going to affect you. So this idea that you just make all the right decisions and then you major in something important in college. Now you probably, if you're going to go to college right now, we're stuck in a really shitty system where that's probably the best bet. But I think that's even problematic. College shouldn't just be like, you get something that's going to pay well. It should be something that you want to do with your life. Because, I don't know, I value life a lot more than Ben Shapiro. I see it as a crazy thing that we all get to experience. And I think we should be able to do what we want to do with it before we die. And Ben Shapiro's out here. Okay, just our axioms are just so at the front that it makes listening to this dude hard.
Statistics that black college graduates don't earn as much as white college graduates. Well, that doesn't adjust for major. If you major in a soft study, a liberal arts study, you're not going to make as much money as if you major in STEM, which is why white college graduates earn less than Asian American college graduates, for example. Right? They're just decisions. And so what I said in that clip, and it's right, obviously, which is why you see the people who I'm talking to, one is a member of the local NAACP, one's a member of the Seattle Stranger. Right? You see these people go from laughing to being kind of chastened a little bit in the clip. It is not arguable that pathologies of poverty like single motherhood have nothing to do with race. When the single motherhood rate in the black community went from 20% in 1960 to well over 70% today, that is going to have some significant downstream effect. When the high school dropout rate differential between high school black students and high school white students.
What it doesn't mention, is I've actually looked this up, is the single motherhood rate didn't just go for the black community. It actually went up for every community all around, even whites. And actually, I think it went up at a higher rate than the black community did in white communities. Because, of course, their starting points were lower. Okay, I'll give that. Like, there was higher single motherhood in black communities, and there was lower at the time. But as they went up, they both went up, and whites went up at a higher percentage. That doesn't mean that they are higher. That doesn't mean there are more single white mothers, but it definitely grew at a higher rate. So I mean, like, he's acting like that this hasn't affected white communities as well, to try to explain away the problems within the black communities.
Is significant. That's going to have significant downstream effect. What does that have to do with race?
It's going to have downstream effects, but why has it affected black communities way more than it's affected white communities?
The answer is it doesn't have anything to do with race. Okay, so I think the way to discuss it is to point out over and over and over again that this is not a racial distinction.
Except for I've had to point out over and over and over again why it is. Like, Ben Shapiro just doesn't want to listen. That's the thing. He's convinced. He's not going to take any arguments. And anything you say is ridiculous. And then he uses his circular logic, which is like impossible to argue against because it's so fucking frustrating. He's just so, he's smart. He's just so dishonest. Like, he's such a fucking grifter.
This is a distinction between decisions that individuals make and can make. And our job in terms of public policy is to incentivize people to make the right decisions, not to
How are you going to pass policies that just incentivize when we should be passing policies that literally give these people resources? That seems such a misuse of policy. What we could do with policy, we could do something so much greater than just try to incentivize people to work harder when people already work harder. Okay? Alright? I can give a testimony to this. I work like 60 hours a week usually, other than recently, because my hours have been getting cut. But normally I work 60 hours a week, alright? I was almost homeless at one point. Are you going to sit here and tell me that there aren't things that exist that are outside of our control? Because I was a stickler with money during that time. I was trying to get everything paid on time. There are just things that are outside of our control that we can't control. And I'm talking this from someone who came from a middle-class family, or a middle-class family. And I even have things that are against me. And you're going to tell me these communities that suffered racial injustice for generations don't at all have any of these things against them? Because I will bet everything I have that they definitely have more things going against them than I do. And I know I have things going against me due to my own class. I don't even have to deal with the racial aspects of my ancestors being enslaved. Like, so this is just stupid, because people even who aren't within these races will suffer things that are beyond them just making good decisions. And then when we look at these other minority communities, we can see those very things, the same things that people like me would suffer. But then we can also see the historical things that are going to affect these people, the racial biases within society that are going to affect these people. It's just it's this whole American dream thing that he acts like is so existent, that everyone has an equal opportunity to everything. It's, you work hard, you'll be rich. All of this just bullshit.
Incentivize them to make the wrong decisions by, for example, compensating them for making the wrong decisions, which is what welfare policy did in the 1960s and helped
No one compensates for doing bad decisions. You can talk about how our welfare system is a little problematic, where it keeps people in a trap, where if you get out of welfare and you get a job, you actually make less money. We can talk about fixing things like that, but we can't act like that when people are on welfare, it's just simply because they made bad decisions, which isn't at all the reason, okay? Not because people who work at McDonald's and don't make enough to pay for their, like, living, maybe they have a kid, or maybe they have, like, a mother they have to take care of. They didn't just make bad decisions why they got stuck at McDonald's. Things happened that led them to have to be stuck working there. They're literally, not everyone can be, like, what's the argument? Not everyone can be a business owner. And some people have to be McDonald's workers. I'm sorry. That's obviously us as a society have decided we like McDonald's. We like all these other restaurants that pay like shit. So people are going to fill those roles. Okay, not everything is just a personal decision. This is the hyper individualism that I hate, because it's so counterproductive to freeing the individual by focusing on the individual. You free the individual by looking at the collective problems. We look at the collective problems, we fix those. People at an individual level experience more freedom, more fulfillment.
Exacerbate the problems of single motherhood in black communities, by the way, as well as white communities. The single motherhood rate in the white community was 5% in 1960. Today, it's well in excess of 40%.
Okay, so he admits about the statistic after he made his argument. So I was right about that statistic as well. I just, oh my god, this guy is so dishonest.
But thank you for that. I mean, I think the thing that is a little frustrating when I hear Democrats talking is that they refuse to address the culture issue whatsoever. They immediately want to go to social programs and not discuss culture.
I mean, sure, I could agree that us on the left, we don't like to talk about culture. It's an uneasy topic to talk about. But we're not wrong to focus on the social programs, because the material conditions of the people is what shaped these cultures. And if we don't fix the material conditions of these things, we're gonna have like socialized, like it's gonna be normalized to do theft and all these other crime activities. These come from being poor. The culture gets shaped from the resources available. That's how culture gets made. Like, I just. So of course we're going to focus on the policies that literally affect people materially, because if you want to affect the culture, that's how you're going to do it. You're not just going to tell someone, pick yourself up from your bootstraps, stop being lazy, boom, problem solved. That isn't how the real world works. That's some bullshit fantasy land these conservatives have sold themselves. That isn't how any of this works at all. Okay? Grow up, Benny boy. Grow up, see the real world. Stop this American dream, equal opportunity bullshit. It doesn't exist.
And I just think culture is such an important element that does drive income inequality. I'm just surprised they won't do it.
I mean, all we mean by culture when we say
culture is driven by income inequality. It's not the very thing that makes income inequality. Come on. This isn't that hard to understand. This is a really simple concept.
Culture is just decisions made by people. And when we say culture, it means like a disproportionate number of bad decisions or good decisions made.
No, that's not at all what culture is. Oh my god. Okay, how are you going to blame something in culture and then not even know what it is? Do you really think culture is just decision making? Like, oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my Jesus. Maybe I should jump out that window. Holy crap.
Made by a particular group of people. And again, that is not that's why I'm not going to say it's quote unquote black culture on education that black people
He wants to say it's so bad. He wants to say it's black culture. Like, it's right on his tongue.
don't care about education. That's not true. It depends on which areas you're talking about. So again, that has nothing to do with race. And saying that things have nothing to do with race is a pretty good way of explaining that things have nothing to do with race. It's hard to be branded a racist when you keep saying over and over things have nothing to do with race that don't have to do with race. Really appreciate the call. Alrighty, in just a second, we'll take more of your calls at 855-236-30.
Okay. That was painful. It's kind of fun at the same time. The race problems do exist. Doesn't matter what Ben Shapiro says. They do. Sure, we can look at classes that reinforce these things. But class is the mode of oppression that's being used. It isn't the oppression itself. Okay? There is racial, systematic racism is real. We can literally look at it. We can look at the history and how that still affects people today, how our institutions affect those people today. Like I talked about the education system and how it's funded on property taxes. There's a lot of other examples. That's just the one that's in my head right now. So it is a racial thing. I mean, we can look at class and see that that's partly how it's enforced. I mean, there's also society bias against these people as well. But that doesn't mean that it's only class, because it's not. That'd be like being really reductive. It's like he's almost there. He knows that class is a problem. Not enough to support something like socialism, but enough to know that it's a problem. But he refuses to see it as what is being used to oppress these people, which it's just dumb. I mean, it's really obvious. We can see this, and we can see that it disproportionately affects certain communities. It's literally right there. It's why he won't take any of the arguments. He didn't debunk anything. He just said, ignore this, ignore that, ignore this, ignore that. I think the only thing he talked about was culture that he tried to make an argument for. Everything else wasn't even a debunk. This is just a really dumb take. Like, I mean, we have all the data to support systematic racism as being a thing. Reducing it to class doesn't get all the things, and acting like it's an oppression by class is just really reductive. It's class being used to oppress. It's not class itself being the oppressed. I mean, like, classes are oppressed, but not when we're talking about systematic racism. Anyway, I hope you had fun getting tortured with me, because now I really want to jump out this window because Ben Shapiro is just brain dead. But yeah, thanks for watching. See you next time.